How's it going, everybody? You are here this evening with North Alabama Hiking YouTube channel, and we are all at Joe Withers State Park in Rogersville, Alabama, and I want to do a video about the start of a new idea, maybe a new series, which is hiking through history. I love hiking, but I also am a history buff, and I think a lot of times those two hobbies can go hand in hand, as many of our areas we hike through have historical significance. Now, here at Joe Withers State Park, you may not think of it. You may just see, wildlife, woods, First Creek, or the Tennessee River. But the historical significance of this area was, this was privately owned land many years ago. And you go back, we'll go back to over 100 years ago, in the 1800s. There would have been hardly anything here in the early 1800s, and then as the century progressed, more and more families moved into northwestern Alabama and started made a home here. And this very land that you'll be walking through is part of that, and it's a large part of that because, like you see here, you have First Creek. Now, First Creek is a lot larger than it used to be because it's, the TVA dams dammed the area up and created the lakes, and it's a lot larger water source. But nevertheless, it was a good water source. If you walk back further on the creek, you'll see it goes back to its normal size a little bit more, but you can wade through it. But at one time it was a lot smaller water source, but nevertheless a popular one because many families that moved to this area made the decision to put their homesteads here. Now, further down the trail, and I didn't unfortunately get to start the video where I wanted to, got a storm possibly moving in, and I wanted to get moving. So with this particular trail, which is known as the Awesome Trail and the Jimmy Sims Birding Trail section of that trail, it goes across Weaver Branch and Neely Branch. Now, those two branches are named after some of the early settlers, the early families that settled here. And it's very commonplace for families, they want to settle along these water sources. Those branches were great water sources. The First Creek was a great water source, the Tennessee River. So many families would settle, if not right on the water source, as close to as they could get, so they could water their, have drinking water, water their animals, wash clothes, and cook with, and do all these things. Since obviously indoor plumbing was not around yet. So that's kind of the historical background of the names of those places. Now, I don't know where First Creek gets its name, or who named that. So, or if it ever had a different name at any point. But those two branches get their names from early settlers. Now, if you're walking through any of Joe Withers State Park, you're walking through what used to be over 100 years ago homesteads, farmland, woodlands that people hunted. In certain areas of the park, you can see where a lot of those woods have been there a long time, but were never touched, were never tore down, and but people would hunt these areas, and they wouldn't just hunt for sport back then. They hunted for for food. They hunted to feed their families. And so what you're looking at through here, this was, without a doubt, I guarantee you, somebody in the 1800s and turn of the century, they were hunting this area. There may be some sections through here, they farmed this area, because farming was a huge way of life for these early settlers. That's how they made it. They lived off the land. Everything that you see here on this video, these folks lived off of it. There's not a resource. There's so many resources out here. These families, they were smart people. Don't let pictures fool you. Don't look at the fact that they didn't have much. They were smart people. And they could live solely off these natural resources in farm and hunt and live off the resources that these woodlands provide. Anyway, so that's kind of, when you're walking through here, that's what you're walking through, is people that made families here and made their lives here and lived off this very piece of ground that you're walking on. Now, things begin to change after the turn of the century. We get into the 1900s and more families have moved here, and cities were built and established. And it was a huge change in, the Industrial Revolution, and a lot of changes were coming about. And one of the biggest changes that really changed the landscape is the geographical makeup of this area, the social, I guess you say, makeup of this area, and that changed the lives of many people in this area for the good, for the most part, is when the Tennessee Valley Authority came in and established these hydroelectric dams along the Tennessee River. And they did a lot of other things in this area too. And where you're hiking through here, this area was affected greatly. Now, to some would have considered it negatively, because so many families had to be moved due to the flooding. They were going to flood, when they dammed these rivers up, it was going to flood a lot of these farmlands, a lot of these homesteads. So there's something else I want you to think about is, you're hiking very close to somebody that may have had to get up and move and change their lives, move to a different area. And it's very controversial. It really was, but I guess in the long run, it benefited the majority of the people, because, this was a poor area, and despite their incredible knowledge, their skills, nevertheless, people still had moments where they suffered, and just because life wasn't easy living that way. And so, but the TVA comes in here and just really changes the whole makeup of this area, and it changed the course of it. It changed the kind of the historical course of this area. It made this area go from a mostly agricultural, and because 90% of the families farmed for a living prior to World War II in most of these areas, and it progressed us towards a more industrial area where people left the farms and went to work in factories and for companies and things like that, because before the TVA was here, these companies really couldn't put a lot of stuff here. Some put companies along the river, and the river was not as navigatable as it is now. It could get very rough, very shallow. Some areas along the Tennessee River between Decatur and Florence had rapids sometimes. It was just the bigger boats could not navigate the area on a consistent basis. Many times they couldn't go through it at all. When the TVA put these series of dams in here, they made the whole river navigable, and that opened up the door for industries. Many industries in Florence and Decatur and eventually Huntsville were able to put their factories in, put their industries in, and it put a lot of people to work. And so they left the farms and they went to work, and they moved into the suburbs or in the subdivisions after World War II. And that's what helped change this area, because without that, these companies wouldn't have put their stuff here, because they wouldn't have been able to use the river. Now they can use the river for really good transportation purposes. So after World War II, when you're driving, you know, decade after decade, if you were driving through this area, you would see farmland decrease, and homes and subdivisions and businesses increase, because of what the TVA changed for this area. And a lot of times, I mean, in a lot of ways it's for the good, and in a lot of ways it's not, because then we got away from, you know, what our ancestors were able to do, which is live off the land and be self-sufficient people. But on the other hand, it did improve. It brought electricity to the area, and it made it to where eventually people could light up their homes, heat their homes easier, air condition their homes eventually, and wouldn't have been possible at the time if the TVA hadn't have did what they did. So I don't have much more time for this video. So, and I know I've rambled on, but if you watch this, like I said, when you're hiking through this area, think about that. Think about the families that would have once lived here, and who would have raised their children and grandchildren, and as time went on. And now we still have families in this area that descend from the very people that lived on this ground that I'm walking on right now. And that's just a really cool thing for me. And except, you know, those families nowadays, they're raising their own families here, and they're taking advantage of what their ancestors helped build. So anyway, may do some more history videos on Lonesome Hike, so stay tuned and thank you for watching.